You either loved him or hated him, but you couldn't not be aware of John McEnroe.
I didn't want to be booed. I wanted everyone to clap for me. But if I wanted to be like my idols,
over the line.
I did learn you gotta be a bit of a lunatic out there.
You cannot be serious.
Few athletes were as dominant and also controversial as tennis star John McEnroe. One of the greatest the game has ever seen. His often volatile life on and off the court are explored in the new Showtime documentary, McEnroe. The film's writer and director joins us live. Barney Douglas, good morning.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
You know, you see that video of McEnroe when he played and how outrageous he was and how loud he was, and then you see him today as a measured, calm commentator. What happened between then and now?
Ah, good question. I think that's what the film looks at. I think he became a father. He learned about life a lot more. He learned about himself a lot more. I think he met a very good woman in Patty Smythe, and a woman who accepted him, foibles and all, and showed him love. And I think it helped him understand himself better. And of course, you know, hopefully we all mellow and mature with age as well.
I don't know if it's fair to say that he was a tortured guy, but as an athlete, he was a guy who put a tremendous amount of pressure on himself, had what seemed like a pretty demanding father. Would you say that that's an accurate assessment? Did he have a difficult time? Did he enjoy his success?
I don't think he did enjoy his success that much. I think he saw success as a way to being accepted or feeling love from his father, for sure. I think that was a difficult, tricky relationship. His father was his manager his whole career. So I think the kind of boundaries were quite blurred there. And I think John also internally just had this drive for perfection, this drive for, I guess, being the best and being absolutely perfect, and anything less was unacceptable and brought him a lot of pain, essentially. So quite a complex individual. And I think the film tries to show him in a more compassionate light, really, and just bring a few different shades to the McEnroe character, as just opposed to being extremely angry.
Do you think that people forget what a dominant tennis player he was? I mean, 155 combined titles, right? Singles and doubles. Played a lot of doubles and won a lot of doubles championship, more than any man in the game's modern era. Do you think people forget just how dominant a player he was?
I think absolutely. And even just making the film, the kind of discovery of actually what an incredible talent he was, what a natural talent, the way he saw the court, the way he kind of mathematically broke it down, the amount of titles he won. I think certainly the headlines sometimes have overshone the kind of, as you say, the ability that he had. And I think what we're just trying to do is potentially with this film is just actually remind people of what a great he was. And he is forthright with his opinions, even now as a commentator, but that comes from a place of deep knowledge and achievement in his own game, you know.
From talking to him and the numerous interviews you did with him, do you think he has regrets over some of the things he did in ways he acted when he played and when he was in his heyday? Or do you think he feels that's what made him the man he is today?
I think that's a really good question. I think those are the things he grapples with even now. I don't think he ever apologizes for his behavior, but I think he regrets in a way that he was never quite the player he could have been. I think he could have been even greater, and I think he regrets that element of it. But I think also he accepts that part of the things that stopped him being even better were part of the things that made him great in the first place. So he's always sort of caught in this conundrum. But I think overall, I think he's happy with his career. He's happy with the life he's had. He's accepted and embraced now the kind of the ups and downs and the rock and roll roller coaster, as it were.
All right, Barney, good stuff. McEnroe is streaming live now on Showtime. You can also keep up with Barney on Twitter. Thank you again.
Thanks very much.